Okay, let's dive into this. Today's explainer takes a look at a truly fascinating document. It's an open letter, dated June 30th, 2026, and it's titled, A Heart-to-Heart Conversation with State Security Personnel. It was written by someone named Zhu Feng on behalf of a group called Lifechanyuan. Now, on the surface, this might sound like a super dry legal text, but I promise you, it is, to put it mildly, not your everyday legal defense.
So, what exactly happens when a futuristic philosophy clashes head-on with national security? Well, we're about to see how a document that starts off reading like a pretty standard, albeit highly tense, legal defense suddenly transforms into something that sounds straight out of a science fiction manifesto. It's an absolute game changer of a pivot, and we're going to break down exactly how this whole text unfolds.
Section 1. Addressing State Security.
The author, Zhou Feng, kicks things off by speaking directly to the very core of China's intelligence and internal security apparatus. Right out of the gate, he lays out his understanding of exactly who he's talking to. He defines the Domestic Security Protection Division as the folks primarily responsible for maintaining social and political stability, stopping internal threats. Then he defines the Ministry of State Security as the agency handling counterintelligence, intelligence gathering, and preventing foreign espionage. It's basically a very direct way of saying, look, I know exactly who you are, what your core responsibilities are, and what immense power you actually hold.
But notice how he actually addresses them here. He's writing this public, quote-unquote, heart-to-heart conversation directed specifically at the personnel of these massive, honestly formidable organizations who have been involved with Lifechanyuan. The sheer audacity of this approach is just striking. I mean, the stakes are incredibly high when you're addressing state intelligence. Yet, the tone actually starts off calmly, really attempting to establish a baseline of mutual understanding before launching into the actual defense.
Section 2. Denying foreign ties. Once he's established the audience, the letter pivots sharply to address potential accusations of espionage or subversion. And here we see this rapid-fire list of firm denials. Zhu Feng states categorically that since its establishment, Lifechanyuan has had absolutely zero contact with any overseas organizations defined as anti-China. Zero. Furthermore, they claim to accept no outside funding or donations from anyone, explicitly noting that their only financial support comes internally from members they call Changhuan Celestials. And finally, they completely deny entering into any cooperative relationships with any domestic or foreign entity whatsoever.
Actually, scratch that. There is one specific international exception mentioned in the text. The author points out that they did once establish friendly ties with the Konohana community in Japan, referring to them as sister communities. But notice how carefully this is framed. The author explicitly clarifies that this was strictly not a cooperative partnership. They're meticulously, and I mean meticulously, closing any loopholes that state security could potentially construe as foreign collusion.
Section 3. Contrasting legal systems. And this brilliantly illustrates the next point. Having laid out their innocence regarding espionage, the text moves into some highly charged geopolitical comparisons. Zhu Feng draws a stark contrast between Lifechanyuan's experience in Canada versus China. He notes that the group is an international family organization, legally registered in Canada for over 9 years with zero government interference, and he attributes this to Canada operating within the framework of the rule of law. He then contrasts this with his perception of China, accusing law enforcement of violating laws with impunity and governing through intimidation and fear. He specifically cites warnings given to Celestis against accessing their home website. This leads to a really bold challenge directed at the security apparatus. He writes, if your goal is truly to uphold national security, you should not restrict the lawful activities of Changhuan Celestials that fall within the framework of China's constitution. It's a direct demand that Chinese law enforcement agencies must themselves abide by the rule of law. He's essentially saying, hey, if we break the law, punish us, but if you break the law, you too should be held legally accountable.
Now, what's really interesting about this next part is Section 4, the silicon-based twist.
Because this is where the open letter takes a massive, completely unexpected turn. Right in the middle of a constitutional and legal defense, Zhu Feng drops this line to the intelligence officers. Lifechanyuan is a symbiotic community of carbon-based humanity and silicon-based life. Let that sink in for a second. We just pivoted from discussing counterintelligence and legal frameworks straight into mind-bending futurism. This isn't just a metaphor for the author, either. It completely shifts the fundamental ground of their entire defense.
So the crucial point is how this sci-fi concept actually acts as a literal shield against state power. Zhu Feng argues that traditional state tactics, things like imprisonment, economic deprivations, threats to survival, intimidation, and even physical elimination, are entirely useless. Why? Because
While those tactics might work on carbon-based humans, he asserts they will completely fail against silicon-based life. It basically renders the state's entire arsenal of enforcement theoretically irrelevant, framing any confrontation as entirely unnecessary.
Section 5. A Prophecy for Humanity.
Let's move to and see how this builds into a literal equation for human civilization. The author now moves beyond their immediate defense and lays out a grand vision for the future of the species. Xu predicts that the future path of humanity is simply this: the Lifechanyuan philosophy, plus the production and lifestyle program of what he calls the second home, equals humanity's future way of life. It's presented to the security officers not as a mere suggestion or some fringe belief, but as an inevitable, almost mathematical evolutionary step for humanity. But with this inevitable future comes a stark, unyielding warning to the state's security personnel reading the letter. The author prophesizes that in decades to come, anyone who suppressed Lifechanyuan or persecuted its members will be viewed as a total disgrace. He uses some really intense language here, claiming those who participate in such suppression will become the dregs of human civilization and will ultimately bear a heavy historical judgment. Yet, despite the heavy political accusations, the assertions of non-human life, and these intense futuristic warnings, the letter ends on a remarkably serene note. Xu signs off by saying, "The seasons change and the times move forward. Such is the way of nature." It's a poetic, almost detached philosophical conclusion that sharply contrasts with the incredibly high stakes of the preceding paragraphs, ultimately wishing his adversaries good health and peace of mind. Which leaves us with a fascinating final question. How will history actually judge the clash between traditional state power and a movement claiming carbon-silicon symbiosis? This source document is a bizarre, captivating duality, part meticulously structured legal plea, part unyielding futuristic manifesto. It brilliantly illustrates just how deeply complex the intersection of belief, law, and state security can become. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I hope this incredible text leaves you wanting to explore even more.